Recently, I just finished a challenge where I learned conversational Spanish in just 30 days. In this video, I want to go over some of the best things that I use to learn Spanish and some of the things that I would avoid if you're also trying to learn a language and want to get conversational as fast as possible. After speaking to different language learning experts like Idalsa from the Mimic Method or Connor Grooms from Baselang, who run their own language learning communities, one of the first things that I learned is you need to be practicing in a way where it's going to replicate components of conversation. I think a lot of people, when they're starting out learning a language, they use an app like Duolingo. And the good thing with Duolingo is it's fun, it's engaging, you can use it for 5 minutes at a time, and you feel like you're progressing because you might do badly when you first start, and then as you do it more and more, you start to be able to translate some basic sentences using the app Duolingo. The problem with that is, in a conversation, if I'm trying to say, hey, how's it going? I don't see 10 words that I can choose from. I don't see hola, ¿cómo estás as an option. I just need to remember that. So I'm not training my brain in the way of actually thinking in a conversational way. I'm training the brain in this kind of matching different ideas. And so yes, you can learn vocabulary, and yes, you'd probably learn some of the basics of a language through an app like Duolingo. So it's not going to hurt your Spanish, it's not going to hurt your abilities, but I totally don't think it's optimal if your goal is conversational. And so what I found a lot more useful and what I was recommended is using an audiobook. So there's a few different audiobooks that we could use when it comes to learning Spanish. So the one that I loved was Michelle Thomas. And Michelle Thomas has a basic foundation course, an advanced course, and a vocabulary course. And if you did all of it, it'd probably take you 30, 40 hours because you're going to be stopping and starting while you listen to it. But what's really cool about these courses is he will say, hello, how's it going? But he's already taught you the word hello and how's it going. And then you pause and you translate it. And then he'll say, I want is quiero, and to speak is hablar. So I want to speak is, and then you pause and you go, quiero hablar.
I cannot buy it because it's very expensive.
No puedo comprarlo porque es muy caro.
No puedo comprarlo porque es muy caro. How much is it, Ruby?
¿Cuánto cuesta?
¿Cuánto es?
¿Cuánto es? He can continually stack on ideas from these building blocks that you learn. So very quickly, in about 30 minutes, you'll be saying a sentence that's maybe 15 words long that you've translated yourself from English to Spanish in your own mind. And you're actually practicing what you're going to be doing when you have a basic conversation in a new language, which is thinking it in English and then translating it in Spanish. And it'll take you a long time before you get to the point where you're thinking in Spanish and flowing in a new language. But through these audiobooks, you're thinking in that way that's going to be most helpful for you when you're conversational or having a conversation. There's also Pimsleur, which a lot of people really love. I found it a little bit boring. I prefer Michelle Thomas because it was teaching a lot of the rules. And then once I understand the rules, that's a useful way for me to think through things. Whereas Pimsleur was a little bit, although they delved into the rules, it was more about repetition and different scenarios that would play out through these kind of mock conversations. I think it's best to see which one is most useful for you, but I'd highly recommend that as a great building block to learning a language. And I think it's one of the fastest ways where you can get a base level to actually start enjoying conversation. And then the next thing that's super important, of course, is conversation. As you learn new skills from Michelle Thomas or any one of these audiobooks, you want to put it into practice as soon as possible. You can use a service like Baselang. There'll be a link below in this video if you want to check that out. But for about $120 a month, you can get unlimited Spanish classes where you can actually have conversation with native speakers. If you don't want to use that, or if you're learning another language, you can use something like italki, where there's a community of people that speak different languages and they sell their time from anywhere from $5 an hour to $20 an hour. You can book them in and you can start practice having a conversation. And why that's so important is it's one thing to learn something in principle, but it's a very different thing to be able to recall it in the moment. And as I started learning more Spanish, I realized I was only using the same 50 or 100 words and a portion of the building blocks that I had learned. And even though I understood the other components and I could accurately recall them while I was doing the Michelle Thomas audiobooks, I wasn't actually using them in conversation because I didn't have the confidence. By having a conversation, being not afraid to make mistakes and letting the other person correct you, then you actually will start to build that as a building block that you'll leverage in a conversation. So it's really important to actually have as much conversation as you can, hopefully with someone that's pretty patient and that's open to giving you some correction and some advice throughout those conversations. And then the last step that I think is really important to fast forwarding your language learning skills is using an app like Anki. And so what that is there's this spaced repetition app where you put in words into this flashcard and you see the word in English, so the word will say to eat, and then you think about it, okay, that's comer, then it flips over, and then if you got that right, you say easy. If you had to think about it for a long time, you might say good, or maybe you mispronounced the word. If you totally failed it, you click fail. And the cool thing about this app is it will see how well you're doing with different words as you're learning them, and it will space the different time intervals from one flashcard to another flashcard to try to show you the words that you're struggling on. And as you get very good at words, it'll show you them less and less. And so while you're having conversation and while you're learning with Michelle Thomas, you can add these as flashcards to your SRS app. I used Anki, it's a completely free app. And that way you can actually practice the words that you're learning. You can also download from the library of different decks that people have created for Anki. And so Michelle Thomas is in there. I download all of the different foundation flashcard apps in my Anki app. And that way I could practice them every night and actually see, have I learned foundation level 5? So that was my strategy learning Spanish in only 30 days. It was a tough month for me, and it's definitely not an easy thing to do. I probably averaged anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day throughout the month. So I think if you are trying to get to a basic level of conversation, then I think committing to 30 to 60 hours, I think would be a good kind of goal to get to. And using this technique, I think you'll be a lot more effective and move faster and therefore enjoy it a lot more if you kind of leverage some of the lessons that I've learned from learning Spanish. So I hope you found that enjoyable. If you've got any questions, definitely let me know. I'm always happy to help you guys out. I try to respond to every single comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.